Just wanted to give a off-the-cuff talk on my thoughts on prostitution. Now, I'm aware that Barbarossa is probably in the process of scripting a new video for that, but I'm between long work shifts and I don't really have the time for that. And I'm also scripting another, in my view, more important video I'm kind of working on long term, so this is going to be off the cuff. But I do have my own 2 cents to contribute to the topic. Now, flat out, overall, I think it should be completely legalized as well as destigmatized. I myself, however, have no interest in partaking. Generally speaking, my views on sex, whether it be bought via the conventional prostitution we call relationships or marriage, or the sometimes legal, sometimes illegal, very formal business transaction of money for pussy. My views of sex are akin to my views of shitting and pissing. I don't spend a great deal of time preoccupied with or being preoccupied with shitting and pissing, and it's just something to get out of the way. And I don't spend money on shitting and pissing usually, so same thing with sex. I don't spend money on that either. But that's just my view. Okay, that said, in the country I live in Germany, I believe in all of the states, but certainly in the state I live in, prostitution is completely legal and accessible. Once again, I don't partake of it for a variety of reasons, but primarily for the reason I've given you. It's just, to me, sex is just like shitting and pissing, not really anything to spend money or time on. But it is completely legal in the state I live in. And I think there's a lot of undue speculation on with regards to how prostitution being legalized in the United States as well as destigmatized would affect society. Now, of course, a lot of the discussion on prostitution is centered around the United States, because the United States is absurdly puritanical and prudish in a lot of ways. Obsessed, I mean, the stereotypes are in large measure true. Obsessed with violence, well, everyone is, but I mean, there's a large portion of violence, but something about prostitution, sex, prudishness, right? However, what I've seen living where I live, and in having lived in several countries, in the countries where it's been legal, is that a lot of the speculation about the prostitution being a sort of transformative force, that if it were in fact legalized in the United States and destigmatized as well, that it would somehow change the whole game, as it were, the game of life, the game of biological reproduction, the game of interaction between the sexes. Quite frankly, I see no evidence for that. Here in the state I live in, prostitution is completely legal. Men go to prostitutes, and there's not a particular stigma attached to it. Not really, not officially, not in the sense that there is in the United States. Many of these prostitutes do astoundingly well. I have some inside sources. Like I said, I don't partake, but I know men who do. I know men who have inside information, as it were. And they tell me some of the prostitutes, when they're working in the prime of their lives, their peak sexual marketplace value, say roughly between 18 and 25, they're pulling in literally €1,000 a day. Now, and what happens is they have a strategy. They work during the time of their peak SMV, and after their SMV is no longer at its peak or declines, they use the money they've saved, and they save a lot of money for the purpose of investments. A lot of them open up nail studios, that sort of thing, tanning salons. So it's, in a way, it's made a sort of a sustainable long-term business if said prostitute concentrates her time and energy and on her job, essentially, during her peak SMV years. And there's no real stigma attached to it. I mean, nobody, not in the sense in the United States. I mean, people go to prostitutes all the time, or men go to prostitutes all the time, and I mean, nobody thinks twice about it. But despite it being completely accessible and legal, although probably not inexpensive in many cases, you don't see men in droves abandoning the relationship construct or marriage construct here. You see them pursuing, as always, the same thing. And I think a lot of that's related to some of the topics and things I mentioned in my previous video on the desire for unfreedom. But this idea, which I think is undue speculation, or at least speculation that probably wouldn't pan out, that prostitution would just change the landscape in the United States if it were legalized and destigmatized, I don't think so. Men have this, the male mother need, the sense of loneliness I talked about in the previous video at length. I talked about that, as well as the drive to breed. I mean, human beings have that, and you don't see them giving that up just so they can satisfy their base needs. They do that intermittently sometimes, but this is not a constant. I mean, there are, of course, in rare cases, some cases, constant customers, men who return to the same prostitute over and over. It exists, but it doesn't exist very often. So, based on my observation, this is me observing subjectively, I don't see any massive change coming to that. There's another aspect to it as well, of course. That's the aspect of the government. You see, in Holland, the government's involved. In Germany, it's trying to get involved. I mean, after all, making all that money, that's all taxable revenue. And the government, of course, wants to get access to its people, if you will's money. I mean, they want to take your money. That's what the government's there to do, to take your money. And supposedly to provide services, which it does, but not very well. In some cases it does an okay job, but imagine, a lot of students, young student women do that too. They'll work 3-4 times a week, a couple of hours. You have a couple of thousand already from that as well. But the government wants to tax that. They're not going to just let that go. And this is now speculation on my part, but I speculate that in the Anglosphere, and I know in Australia, one of the few countries I've actually never been to, but it is, from right here, it's legal there with brothels. But I say in the UK, or in the United States in particular, where feminism, capital F feminism, has its strongest foothold, I don't really see, I see, if it were to be legalized and destigmatized in the same sense that it is here, the government would almost certainly get involved. I mean, they would want the revenue, just like it wants the revenue here, and it actively takes the revenue in places like the Netherlands. And as much as feminists protest the idea of prostitution, body women being used for their bodies and blah blah blah, eventually they would make their peace with that, and they would just try to make it yet another feminist-based, profit-driven venture. Victim culture, this and that. Maybe not victim culture so much as just looking for extra benefits that other people don't get for employment. If you're a working girl, special protections that go well beyond what one might expect for someone a female working in the oldest profession. So there's just a lot of factors potentially involved in all of this that, quite frankly, I don't see as being able to be overcome. And it's huge. Prostitution is huge. In a place like South Korea, which depending on what chart you look at, is number 8 or 12 or somewhere in between, the 12th largest economy in the world. Just imagine, and this is being conservative, that prostitution accounts for 4% of GDP there, and it's not really legal, but it's sort of legal, and a lot of gray stuff. But still, men, once again, are going through the traditional setup. And men And there's one other aspect to it as well, that men themselves are just not. I don't know how many men would have a so-called serious relationship with a woman who's confessed that she worked for 5 years, 5 days a week as a prostitute. I mean, in theory, I wouldn't have a problem with that if I were interested in the relationship construct to begin with, but most men aren't that way. They have puritanical ideas about different things. And I don't think women in the United States would allow it to be completely destigmatized. It's just not to their advantage. And it's in large measure destigmatized here. It's just, I don't see a lot of guys taking advantage of it, as opposed to pursuing more traditional avenues of relationships and what have you. So, as I said, I don't see a huge transformation occurring due to prostitution being completely legalized in certain Anglo-Saxon countries. Like I said, here in Germany, it's legal. People just, some men go with them, some men don't. But it's not become some sort of paradigm. It's going to be a specific man who takes advantage of it on a routine basis. And very few men make it a way of life, or a routine that just is ongoing. I don't see that very often. So I'm just a bit skeptical about how much prostitution would just change everything. And of course, male mother need and these things can't be met. I mean, they can't be met in a real, so-called real relationship either. But the illusion, or rather, the delusion and illusion are there in the case of the real relationship. But you don't see that with regards to the whole prostitution thing. So, and you can't get that. I mean, you could simulate it. You could pretend, but the pretending isn't as powerful as the pretense, as it were, in the real relationship, the so-called real relationship. So, just some thoughts I had on prostitution, brief thoughts, long. I just don't see a huge transformation occurring because prostitution was suddenly legalized. I honestly don't know. I'm looking forward to Barbarossa's video, what his thoughts are on this, but these are my thoughts. Like I said, I'm working on another topic, fairly unrelated right now, but it's not like prostitution is that inaccessible. And if it were destigmatized, well, yeah, and in a final analysis, yeah, you'd probably get some more men going for it, but they'd still go for the so-called traditional setup. I mean, that's what men do. Men are, as women are, slaves to their instincts, and part of their instincts encompasses the male mother need, the need for the comforting mother figure, as well as regular sex, which they perceive they're not paying for. I mean, obviously they are, but yeah. So anyway, those are my brief thoughts on nothing spectacular on prostitution, and who knows when the next video will appear. Hopefully not not too far off, hopefully. But in the words of Shepard, I should go. In the words of Mr. Bateman, I need to return some videotapes. Take care.